So my name's Alysha Robison. I work at Laramie High School and I teach English as a second language. I have been at Whitewater for about 4 years and I've been on teaching team for almost 3 years. I think in the fall will be 3 years of being on the teaching team, which has been a really incredible journey of watching Whitewater change and watching who we are change and what we even teach about change just based on as our congregation has grown. And in my life, one of the things that's really forcing a lot of growth lately is my death wish that I put in at the beginning of the year. And I remember arguing with God about it. And he kept saying, you need to write down unforgiveness. And I was like, no, it's not unforgiveness. It's being critical and it's being frustrated and it's being impatient and all of these things. And I just felt like the Lord kept saying, no, it's unforgiveness. And I was like, no, it's not. But I just really felt that strongly. So I just wrote it down, turned it in and just thought, well, okay, we'll see what happens. And I kind of forgot about it. I remember that everyone else did it, but for some reason I just forgot what I wrote. And then I think sometime in March, maybe February, somewhere around there, I was driving home one night from sermon planning and I felt like God was saying, you are mad at me. And I was like, what, God? That's really crazy. You can never be mad at God. Like, you're God, you're good, you are love, you're all these things. And he was like, no, you are so mad at me. You fasted and you prayed and you believed and you did all the right things. And yet a lot of really negative things have happened in my life since I moved to Laramie. My parents got divorced and that was just kind of like the beginning of several really difficult things in my life. And just realizing that I was mad at God about that and that I needed to let go of that. And whenever we talk about forgiveness, we always think about like someone did wrong to me. And God didn't do wrong, but I perceived that he had done something wrong because my perception was that he didn't listen to me or that he didn't care enough to prevent all of these negative experiences from happening. And it came to this moment of realizing with God, like, he has a bigger picture. He has more in his mind's eye than I do, that he sees things. And Isaiah tells us, like, who has seen the mind of the Lord or understood his thoughts? And that has really been coming back to me a lot lately of just letting go and trusting God and coming back to a place of realizing, God, you are good, even when it maybe doesn't seem that way. Maybe when it seems like you're being a jerk to me. And just realizing, like, these are growth-creating experiences for me. And I was also remembering recently that when I was in junior high, I became a Christian, and I first heard the story of Solomon and how he prayed for wisdom and how God was just really impressed by that and how everyone was really, and then he became this great king and everything was so great. And in my little maybe 14-year-old mind, I was like, well, everyone thought he was cool because he prayed this, so I'm going to pray for wisdom. And now I look back on some of my experiences and I realize that God is honoring that request for wisdom and for strength and that he's preparing me for more things to come. And sometimes I think back to 14-year-old me and I'm like, why did you say that? Look at how hard things have been. Someone said to me recently that in a crisis moment in her life, she said to herself, well, God hasn't fallen off of his throne, has he? And that's really stuck with me. And it's something I've been really thinking about, like, okay, is my crisis big? Are there really big things going on in my life? Sure. Is God still sovereign? Does he still know what's best for me and for my family? Does he still know what my next step is? Did he already plan out my next step? And just really focusing on that and on trust. And because of how the last 6 years of my life have taken shape, it's been a different process than it was in the past. I've had uncertainty all of my adult life of like, where do I go next? Where do we go? And just taking those things to the Lord. But because I felt disappointed in who God was and how things turned out, it's been harder for me to pray about it and trust God and to remember that he is good. And so that's been a very interesting process for me over the last couple months of saying, okay, God, you are good. And you have a plan. And maybe part of it seemed like a pretty terrible plan. But the overall plan of my life is good. And coming back to that 1 John where it says God is love. And thinking about, I'm not a parent, but I think of God in the parent way a lot, or as a teacher where I think sometimes loving my students and loving my friends or my family is telling them when they do something wrong, or discipline, or misguiding them, or letting them make mistakes. And realizing that God does that too. That he says, you need to knock it off. Or he says, that was a really good try, let's try this again. Matt said in a sermon recently, when he was talking about Miriam, that God may discipline us, but he isn't moving on without us. And that has been a really big thing for me, of realizing that some of the pain that I've walked through over the last 6 years has been to bring freedom to others. And beginning to realize that makes it more of a sacrifice and a love offering than just me being hurt and me being disappointed. When I felt like God started showing me that, it opened things up to make it more of a big picture for me, and more of a beautiful picture of God's redemption. And learning to take that, and instead of being like, God, my heart is broken, I'm mad about it, to say, God, my heart is broken, heal me, and use this as a process to heal other people, and use this as a way to bring your kingdom to the people who need it the most. To me, I need it the most.